How's it going, everyone? Welcome back to Insider Gaming. Mike Strauss, Senior Editor here, and I'm joined once again by Nate Purkeypile of Just Purkey Games, the creator, founder, developer of the Axis Unseen, a monster hunter game where you are hunting mythical creatures from folklore. Nate, this is something we've been working on for a while, and I'm excited to sit down and talk to you more about the game.
Yeah, I'm excited to chat about it. It's fun that the demo's out there now.
Yeah, so the Axis Unseen, it's set to launch, if you're watching this before, it's set to launch October 22nd on Steam and Epic Games. There is a demo out available now to try it out, and I want to dive right in. It's been in development for some time. This is your first game by yourself since leaving to go on your own from working at Bethesda and working on games like Skyrim and Fallout series and Starfield. And what's that feeling like knowing that this game it's finally here after everything you've worked on?
I mean, it's like exciting and terrifying at the same time because you don't really know how ship is gonna go. People are like, "Oh, like how are your wish lists doing and stuff?" And it's like, yeah, you can kind of gauge it through that, but the math on that is so fuzzy that yeah, you just gotta ship it and see how it goes.
That leads in. You mentioned like wish list. The wish listing does a lot to help push a game on Steam or whatever storefront. Like I don't. There's still people I don't think that understand just how important wish listing a game, especially an independent title, can be. How much do you feel maybe that's helped, or how has that the response been from, especially being out in the open with your development as much as you have?
I mean, that stuff certainly helps a lot. You're right. It's like when people watch YouTube videos and they're always like and subscribe, but for indie games, it's like, yeah, wishlist it. And like people can look up that data kind of publicly, like on SteamDB, you can track stuff. So right now I'm at like number 450 or something for of like all games. So
Yeah.
I feel like that's like a pretty good spot for like a game mostly developed by me.
What's it like the challenges of developing a game by yourself? You don't have obviously you don't have a team to rely on and bounce ideas off of and things like that. But aside from that obvious one, what might be a challenge that people aren't really aware of? Is it motivation to keep going or anything like that?
Motivation's not really that big of a deal for me because I've always been into games and doing it for a long time. But the big thing is you're having to wear like so many hats that you kind of have to be somewhat of an expert in everything. So sometimes you'll just like come across a problem and be like, oh, this is terrifying. I don't know anything about why this doesn't work or whatever. And you'll have to dig in and do all this research and figure it out. But at the same time, that's really gratifying to fix that stuff. And also, if anything ever breaks, like it was your fault in the first place. So that's not frustrating in the same way of like, oh, somebody broke the build. It's horrible. You're like, no, I did. It was me.
What I know you can't really do the whole, cover your ass type of mentality there. It's like, no, I need to take care of this, especially when it hangs up on the development. We've all seen it. You hit that
Hmm.
one bug where you can't move forward. And then have there been times with that with you where you've hit a bug where you're just like you're stuck basically for however long it might be.
Thankfully, it's not ever been for more than like a day or two, or it's been a thing where I can like solve it later. Like this is part of why I did like a 3.5 year project, right? I'm like on Unreal 5, all these fancy new features, and it's like some stuff didn't quite work. Like I couldn't generate what's called nav mesh for my whole map for a while, only just part of it. So I was like, well, I'm a solo dev. I guess I'll just do other stuff until that's fixed and I can generate it for the whole map. And it got resolved as expected.
What's been the feedback like throughout the development process and what you're sharing? What's been just the fan response to seeing what you're doing?
I think it's been pretty positive. Like, there's a lot of people out there who like both heavy metal and horror. There's like certainly a crossover there.
Yep.
So people who are into that are like really excited that there's something that matches that sort of aesthetic because there's not that much out there when it comes to like heavy metal games. And if there are, it's often like a little bit of a cheesy take. So I'm excited to bring something that is like in my head what a metal game could be.
Yeah, I mean, to me personally, this goes right there, like, because I've been playing it before we talked. when it comes to the metal, metal is my forte with music. It's metal and it's punk. Like that's just been my thing. Metal Hellsinger, I thought did it really well. The idea
Yeah, that
of
was a cool
playing
game.
a first person shooter where my shots are matching to the music, it's just fantastic. And now VR is coming, and I'm gonna end up playing Hellsinger VR because I'm gonna get myself sick doing that. This adds to that. You have that tension. You have this music, this completely original soundtrack that was composed, matching the feeling of what's happening in the game. How did you kind of figure out, all right, we need this style of music, grant, because obviously there's more than one type of metal, but this song to match this element of what's happening, this fight, when you get into a fight or you confront a beast, a monster, and how did that come about, trying to just pair things up to where it actually, made sense and didn't just sound all mushed?
I mapped that out really, really early before most of the stuff actually existed. I was like, this is what the regions are going to be, and like the spectrum of music that I think I need. Here's like, I think the big events that will happen, like, hey, you get a new power up, stuff like that. And I did end up shuffling a few of the tracks around because the structure of the game changed slightly, but I ended up having all the pieces there to lay out everything that I need, and it worked out great. And I also got all the individual instruments also, not just like the final track. So that way I can like sometimes play like, you know, the sun breaks over the hills, it's dawn, play the full track. But then after combat, I don't want to just like kick back into the full track every time, so I can just play parts of it, right? Like just the piano or something more low
Yeah.
key. So it's because people have been like, "Oh, it's a hunting game. Do I want music blaring the whole time?" And it's like, well, first off, I tried to balance the sound and stuff where it's fine, but also it's not always like da 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 the whole time.
It's not just in your face screaming at you.
Right.
It's not all evil. Metal is not all evil. I don't care what my parents tried to tell me. I've heard some very heavy songs with the most friendly lyrics I will ever hear.
Yeah, and if you go to metal shows, like those are some of the nicest people, and the shows go
Right?
very smoothly.
Right?
Whereas pop shows that I've gone to, I can't say that's the case.
No, like I completely aside, and people listening, some might appreciate this, some might. So, Bullet for My Valentine is one of my favorite bands. They are going on tour. They're on currently a world tour with Trivium. They're coming to the North America for their 20-year The Poison tour. I have seen them 15 times,
Oh
and
wow.
I will say that they are the friendliest crowds of any show, whether you're in the mosh pit or not. You're in the mosh, you
Mhm.
get knocked down. They're like the few shows where people stop everything, make sure you're okay and you didn't break anything, like lose your glasses, contact, whatever, and then start over. Is like, everybody ready? Okay, let's go again. Whereas I've been to others where that it's crazy and they don't care. Well, you fall, you fall. Like that's just sorry about your luck. Like so, yeah. Like it just adds to that point of that being friendly. Okay, back to the game. When you're by yourself doing the solo dev, and you do, how does getting an opinion on if something works or it's not working, did you have like a select group of maybe play testers or players in general to check it out and be like, what do you think of this mechanic, this feature, or how did you figure that out, whether something worked or not?
It was a little bit of a mix. Like in general, I tried to have a new person play it every week or so throughout the whole process. That way I could like iterate on things and balance it. But like towards the end, starting in like February of this year, I had some of the active people in my Discord. I just invited them to this private playtest where I slowly opened up the map so they could play the whole thing. And that was really helpful. And some of those people dug like incredibly deep into the game. Like one guy was like, I'm gonna play the whole game melee. I'm like, yeah, I mean, you can. I wouldn't suggest stabbing Bigfoot, but go right ahead. He did it.
The ideas some people have, like I've always been, when
Right.
I had, during my time like working in software development, my biggest goal whenever I tested, sent it to people to test, was to, I want you to break it. Like, do whatever you can to break my stuff.
Yeah.
Because if you can't, then I know I did something right. If you can, okay, things are probably as expected. Did you have that kind of mindset where when you were sending it, like you were kind of hoping people found things, or was there a worry people would find things? Like what was that thought process like?
I think it's kind of the whole point because I've tried really hard to like keep the game really stable and like fix all the bugs, and I play test it constantly myself. I've been playing through the whole thing every single weekend for a while now. But like fundamentally, when I play the game, I'm not gonna do some things that other people do, and I watch someone play, and I'm like, I never thought to do that. Like, okay, and
How,
that's incredibly
yeah.
helpful.
How when you're working on a game day in day out, and it's the only thing you're working on for a while, it can be easy to, I guess, kind of be fatigued by what you're seeing and what you're doing. Did you ever hit that wall when you were building the Axis Unseen, or was there ever a point where you maybe thought to yourself, maybe I need to go in a different direction?
Not as much. I think like being a solo dev, that helps a lot with that. Cause like sometimes I'll come back to like a system or a bug and I'm like, I don't even know what I was thinking here or how this works. And it's like, yeah, fresh eyes because you like practically forget what you were doing.
Yeah.
Versus when you're like in AAA working on like this tiny part, like how I watched the Skyrim intro like 500 times or whatever. Like, it's much easier to get burnt out stuff.
On looking at one specific rock for 6 months as opposed
Right.
to the whole. Yeah. So the game has a playable demo on Steam. It is something that we are seeing a lot more of. For a while, demos just weren't coming out, even for smaller indie developers. How important to you was it to make sure that the Axis Unseen has a demo for people who are finding it?
I think it's really important these days, especially with stuff like Steam Next Fest, and it's a good way to sort of soft launch the game in a way where, hey, if there's certain problems and stuff, I can address those before the full launch. And like I had 67 open issues yesterday, and now it's 45. I have a whiteboard that I'm looking
Yeah.
where I write it down every day. Like I put out a patch last night with like 30 fixes of like random things. Like for some reason, for a long time, people were in the intro that like teleports you around between cuts to music, and
Yeah.
some people would just get flung off, and I had no idea why for the longest time. But then watching people play, it's like, oh, it turns out if you stand on a corpse when it cuts, that's what does it. And so I was able to figure it out, and then I patched that right away.
The thing is, but is that a bug or is that a feature people didn't know they wanted? There's always that fine line. It's not a bug. It's a feature that you didn't know about yet.
I will say there's some weird stuff that I have kind of left in for speedrunners. There's going to be some like wild speedruns in this game, I think.
So how long until we potentially see the game on like GDQ?
Hopefully it'd be there. I think there's someone abusing like a Sasquatch punch to get to the top of a mountain. I don't know.
So it's coming out on Steam. It's available on Steam and Epic Games. Is there any thought of porting to console, because obviously the player base on console is a completely different animal, but yeah, is there any thought on that? What would it take for you to make that decision to do it, as far as, you know, results of the game's launch or anything like that?
Yeah, like I know a lot of people who did the sim ship thing and did PC and consoles at the same time. And as an indie dev, that can be a huge risk because
Hmm.
basically, if you're going to get someone else to port it, that can cost a lot of money.
Yeah.
And it can be hard to get exposure on those platforms too. So I think it's good to make sure that like the game will do well. And honestly, it's also incredibly stressful dealing with multiple platforms, and there's a whole bunch of rules around putting it on there and making sure it passes what's called like the certification process. So basically, I want to see how this launch goes and then figure out if I'm going to do it or not. And like, to be frank, like if I'm going to put it on Xbox, I think you need a Game Pass deal at
Yeah.
this point as a small indie. Otherwise, it's very easy to just not make any money.
And that actually brings up a point I was going to get to, the Game Pass idea. I ask this to every indie developer I speak with, because there's this notion of it being bad for smaller studios.
I
What do you have? Do you have a thought on that? I don't know. I don't want, like, you know, put you in a bad spot or anything like that. But everybody has their own opinion on how these types of marketplace deals, you can call them, or subscription deals, or whatever, catalog deals, can benefit or hurt. How do you feel it would do for a game like the Axis Unseen in getting more eyes for people who may not think to spend the money on the game itself, But hey, it's free. Let's take a look at it right now.
I think it's hard to say one way or the other because it can depend a lot on how that game goes. It's like, oh, on one hand, maybe nobody's going to see it, and this is a way to get them to see it. And if you can get a good amount up front, that's great. But then it's like, oh, well, what if people did see it on their own, and then everybody went and bought it, and then I could have been like riding around on yachts with Gabe Newell. Like that would have been great, but you don't know. So I can understand why people take the deals, and it's a good way to mitigate risk and to get like that money up front, which is hard to come by. So, but then people buy less games. So
Yeah. Yeah, exactly. It's that big catch-22 because we've seen games like there's stories of titles releasing on Game Pass and then they just struggled to sell because everybody played it on there,
right,
especially when it's a single-player game. It's one of those things. If it's a small single-player game, you play it in a couple hours on Game Pass and you're done. So yeah, it's finding out if it's the right decision for you.
right. It's not like I have piles of microtransactions, so you get I don't know bow skins or whatever
Why not?
when you buy my game.
Why not?
I,
I want
I,
I want to spend $4.99 to have my bow look like a cow. Just saying.
I'll just say the last big game I worked on and shipped was a games as a service game, and I'd be happy not doing that again.
Uh, what are your ideas going as far as future updates? Obviously, you're working on fixes. It might be tough to talk about. You probably don't want to talk about it, but you have your list of fixes, like you mentioned, the whiteboard in front of you. There's going to be more that comes out when even more people get their hand on the game that you need to worry about. But are you looking at what you might want to add as far as maybe new monsters or anything like that to the game, or is it kind of we're going to wait and see what happens first?
Yeah, it is like even though I say I don't want to do like games as a service, it is also a game that is very expandable. Like, hey, there's like I don't even know how many monsters to pick from across all folklore, but I even have some that I like translated the journal entries already to the different languages that I haven't gotten around to making. So there's the possibility of doing that. Like the model that I think is more interesting than games as a service and like trying to nickel and dime people constantly is like that Hitman game I thought did a lot of really cool stuff where it
Yeah.
was basically a single player game, but they put out lots of cool content and timed events that were super interesting. Like I have an absurd number of hours in that game.
Yeah, the idea of different missions, different targets, like that type of stuff. Yeah, it's again we talk. It's a constant thing when talking about games as a service, whatever it may be. This fine line, this tiptoeing of what people will accept,
Yeah.
and I do think I do think they're doing it right at
I,
IO. It's just one of those. Some people like it, like the idea of like, hey, this month we're releasing this new contract, and you get to target, Archduke Franz Ferdinand. You know what I mean? Like, it's just see what happens if you missed the shot. Like,
yeah. Like those contracts where you only get one shot at it.
yeah,
It's a great idea. And frankly, they're able to get away with a lot more because they're a single player game. Like people complain about microtransactions a lot, and I totally get it. But realistically, those games as a service multiplayer games, if they don't have that, they cannot make and ship that game. They would go bankrupt day
yeah,
one. Like
yeah.
that stuff has to exist for those games to exist.
I look at it too, and this is a big like example of it. But so Call of Duty, for example, went to their whole battle pass system and things like that with their operators, and they make boatload of money. One benefit of that I've seen over the years is now they just release new maps regularly, and it's just included if you have the base game, even if you don't spend an extra dime. Whereas back 15, 20 years ago, they released 5 new maps every 4 months, and you're spending $20 for those maps. Now you're getting 20 new maps, 10 to 20 new maps post launch of games, and you're not spending extra money if you don't want to. So there's that benefit. And I know people are going to watch and go, how are you defending Call of Duty for this? I'm like, because it's not the worst.
Yeah. Because a lot of that stuff is optional.
Yeah. And it doesn't impact the game. Like, I've always been, if it's cosmetic, do what? It doesn't hurt anybody. The second it gets to the point where it's giving the person I'm playing against an advantage over me, that's when I start to get personally upset.
I completely agree with that. I think that's valid.
Yeah. If you want to look like, if you want to look like Cody Rhodes playing Call of Duty, then go play Cody Rhodes Call of Duty. That's your money. You know what I mean? It is what it is. Enjoy having disposable income while you can. Like, it's just good. I can't say I've never bought microtransactions. I did it, and I play Smite. I used to play Smite a lot. Free game, but I spent the money because if I really, really, really enjoy something, I'm gonna support them.
Yeah, I have a big collection of TF2 hats.
Yeah, there's certain things like Rocket League. I used to play Rocket League a lot. I'd buy the cars. Doesn't give you a competitive advantage. Every car is about the same hitbox, but driving around in a Warthog from Halo was pretty damn cool. Like, especially when I'm like recording or streaming or something, it looks cool scoring a backflip goal with a Warthog than with a little, car that everybody else has. Okay, off topic again. I do that a lot. We're gonna move on now to something we talked about and give people watching a look into the Axis Unseen. So what do you have for us?
All right. So yeah, this is a region in the game called the Darkness, and right now I have a cheat on, so I am invisible to the creatures unless I like stab them or something. But there's a creature you can see walking around here, and you can only see it if you look out of the corner of your eyes. So if I'm looking at it directly, I'm not going to see it. So that one is entertaining to fight. And I call it the Tooth Fairy, because it has, instead of eyeballs, there's teeth for the eyes. Let's see if I can get a good look at that. Nice and friendly.
That's not terrifying.
So now I'll just turn off invisible mode and we can see what happens. And I don't know what other creatures are around. This is not like super scripted or anything, so it could end very poorly. So you can like try and watch out for its footsteps and little puffs of dirt. And that's my smell power there, where if it's downwind of me, you can kind of see where it's coming from, the smell. That little red line is a debug thing because I'm in the editor. Yep. So then I got it, and then you can take a look at its corpse out of the corner of your eye. Nice little friendly face there. I think something else is coming. And you might see the tattoo on my hand flare up sometimes, and that's because I have this power called Tremors, where anytime anything is moving nearby, it'll light up.
Now, how far into the game would someone experience this?
This is about halfway. So it's like the third region of 6. And it gets a little weirder here, obviously. And you can be sneaky or not. Like if I'm walking on the dirt, that's quieter versus these rocks over here. See the sound meter on my bow will kick up. And there's something down there, so I can see more scent particles coming this way. And I could try and scout ahead with the spirit arrow. So something over there, but I can't quite see what it is. Or more than one thing, I don't know. That's regular wolf. I've got that guy. They are in like the first region, so they're no problem. Versus whatever else is out here. I think there's something over there.
Now, one of the things with the game is you have to be alert at the fact that in addition to hunting the monsters, you're also can be hunted. How important or what was the implementation like of making sure the monsters could actually track you? Like you talked about your scent being downwind and making sure you're away from them to being tracked. Like, what was that implementation like?
There's lots of custom stuff that I did where they don't just see me, but like these footsteps, those are little things that they actually perceive, and the smell system is custom. And clearly there's something here that's trying to murder me. but I can't see it. There it is. Run! And then as soon as it gets away from me, it's harder to see. So that one is like cloaked in fog. And I have a really far dodge jump like this because some of these creatures are really big and really fast. So being able to jump like that is really helpful.
As far as getting away, say you just don't have, you run out of arrows or anything like that, how far do you have to be for them to give up on the hunt?
It varies depending on the creature, but they'll often lose track of you. But if you're leaving footprints, they'll slowly follow those. So I just backed into where there was this magic power. So this one is a handy one. It's the water magic, so I can like shoot super fast or make my arrow cause something to bleed more. So I can switch to that magic type now. Find something to kill. And these gates here are like the safe points, where if I get there, I can lock in the energy from the creatures that I've killed, if I make it. If I die, I'll drop it where I was at. Sort of like a light Dark Souls approach. And this area has like some creatures that it took one tester like a good 5 hours to even figure out what one of the creatures was. Even though it ended up right next to them a whole bunch of times.
Oh, they just kept getting basically stalked by it.
Yeah, there's some interesting behaviors. Basically, I didn't want just like you reskins on everything. I want them all to act in different ways. So there's some things that you might not expect.
Now, how did you determine how the creatures act? Did you go strictly based off folklore, or was there kind of an idea of, you know, just creative freedom, I guess?
That's kind of like how I helped pick them from folklore, is I didn't want just ones that looked different, but I also thought about how it would work gameplay-wise. And your regular arrows can catch on fire if you put them into fires like this. So that can be useful to like put it on the ground and help light your arrows on fire. Maybe I'll use my magic.
In total, how many different arrow types and spells are there to attack or to utilize?
It's like what 5 elements basically. So for the magic.
Yeah.
So there's 5 magic powers. There's like 4 different arrow types. But then there's all sorts of other items you can find, like bigger quivers, better bows. I'm running because there was a giant goat guy over there. It's very likely I die here now.
Goat man looks like the devil.
Yeah, that one is basically the devil. It's like fire is coming out where it walks. So this arrow is not going to do anything to him, I'm pretty sure. And some things can throw you pretty far, so it's useful when you get like your teleport power.
Mm-hmm.
Think I can take him in hand-to-hand combat?
I'm gonna guess no.
So sometimes you want to just avoid a creature until you can get more equipment. So
And
that's what happens. And then it'll send me back to the safe area, right, where I can like restock my equipment and level up. And this area also fills up with stuff as you kill things. So I sort of cheated, so there's only a few things here. But, like, see, I killed the wolf, right? So I get a journal entry, and you can read about it. And as you collect your powers, like, briefly cheat here. Boom. You see how it'll start to fill up with more and more creatures.
And if you're playing the game, say you're interested in picking up the Access Unseen, what is the ultimate end game? What is the goal through it all for those who are just learning about it.
So it starts with like this intro set to heavy metal, and you find out that you were in one of this like village of hunters, and everybody there gets killed, and you end up traveling to this world. And I'm fast traveling basically to the start of the game to show you where you end up in this world, and eventually you're trying to get to this mountain that's in the middle of everything, at the top of stuff. And if you get there, you'll find out what happens. And depending on how you play the game, there's a few different endings. Normally, the loading times are not this long, by the way. I'm in the editor. Normally, it's a couple of seconds. But here, let me grab some energy. But that big mountain there, it's about 2 miles tall, and you end up getting to there by traveling all around this world through the 6 different regions to that. So that's your end goal. And you can find lots of journals along the way to find out what it was like for people in this place. Like, there's one right over here, actually. So there's like 25,000 words or so of journals that you can read if you want to find out more about the place. And some environmental storytelling, little locations to find. But it is more open. It's not going to get like, oh, you have a quest to go collect 3 werewolf pelts. It's not really that kind of game. It's more about the hunting.
It leaves to your imagination of what you want to do and when you want to do it.
Yeah, I'd put it much closer to things like Shadow of the Colossus vibe-wise than like a grindy MMO type thing.
This has been absolutely fantastic to see. The Axis Unseen available October 22nd on Steam and Epic Games Store. It launches, if you're watching this after the fact, go check it out, go pick it up. If you're watching this before the game launches, check out the demo on Steam. Wishlist the game. Nate, thank you so much for showing this, for taking the time during the busiest, probably the busiest you've been in years with the game's release right around the corner.
Yeah, for sure. My hours work chart has climbed up. Generally, I haven't crunched on the project, but lately there's a lot going on.